the people who fight Israel in the name of Jesus.
Those are Maori in New Zealand. Maori, of course, are the indigenous peoples there. And that is the traditional haka. We got to know that haka when Avi Yamini and myself and other rebels went to New Zealand for Avi's book launch. They actually did a haka for Avi. Can I show you that? Take a look. Well, we got to know an incredible collection of people from the Maori community, led by their senior pastor, Brian Temeke, who is so freedom-oriented, it's amazing. He resisted closing his churches during the lockdowns. And look at him stand for Israel, because he sees in Israel that they are the indigenous people of the land, just as the Maori are in New Zealand. And I was delighted to see my friend Barbara Kay had a column in the National Post entitled, Israel, a True Indigenous Success Story. And the subheadline, New Zealand's Maoris and other indigenous groups support Jewish reclamation of their homeland. And that was published in the National Post about a week and a half ago. Joining me now via Skype is our friend Barbara Kay. Barbara, great to see you again.
Same here, Ezra. It's been a few months, I think.
Well, it's nice to have you back. You know, a lot of people don't think of Jews as being indigenous. In fact, in much of the world, Jews are in exile, the wandering Jew. I mean, Jews are a minority everywhere, but in the Holy Land, the land of the Bible, that's where the Jews started. That's where this whole Jewish business started. And from that point of view, Jews absolutely are the indigenous people there. Judaism predates both Christianity and Islam by thousands of years.
That's true. They are the only extant people. You know, people often say, oh, well, the Canaanites were there first. They may have been, but the Canaanites were assimilated into the Jews, the Jewish people, or they fled, or they had a war, whatever. The Jews are the only extant people for whom that land is sacred. And that's usually the short answer to what constitutes indigeneity. Progressive people have a lot of trouble absorbing two ideas. One, that you can be a white person and still belong to an indigenous people because they associate all white people with imperialism and oppression. And the second thing is it's hard for them to imagine an indigenous people that are also dominant in the land, that they have actually achieved reclamation, that they have achieved their return and have become sovereign, which is the dream of many other indigenous people like the Kurds and many other people. And by the way, the Kurds, I think, really deserve their own, they really deserve to be a nation, but that's the topic for another day. Anyways, yes, but the Jews do they tick off all the boxes that apply to indigenous as applied to other people who we do call indigenous.
Well, the British Empire was at its peak probably on the eve of the First World War. And after that, the British empire began to fragment a little bit, and that was greatly hastened after the Second World War. So Israel is in the same category as several dozen countries that were decolonized when the United Kingdom withdrew. Now, Israel had been colonized over the years. It had been colonized by the Persians, colonized by the Turks, colonized by the British. And then when the British decolonized, they properly gave the land back to the original people. Actually, they agreed to give it back, part of it to the Jews and part of it to the Arabs. The proposal the United Nations proposed was that there would be two countries birthed there, but the Palestinians attacked the Jewish state. But I guess through the decolonization process, Israel is just like every other decolonized country. I mean, it's literally the same.
Yeah, after the war was over, the First World War, 23 new nations came out in the Middle East that were kind of decolonized, and 22 of them were Arab and one was Jewish. And nobody ever questions the legitimacy of all the 22 Arab nations that were created. Jordan is a new nation, was a new nation, same time as Israel. Syria was new. Lebanon, not all. Egypt is an ancient country and has always been there. But a lot of the countries surrounding Israel became nations at the same time as Israel did. And nobody's ever questioned their legitimacy, only Israel's.
You know, we really learn so little history these days. I think that most kids at college, if you were to ask them about slavery, they would only know one slavery story, which is slavery in the United States South, that it was white slave owners and black slaves. I don't think that 1 in 10 college kids these days would know that slavery has occurred on every continent, and that in most cases, slave owners, because in most cases people are not white, in most cases slave owners are not white, whether it's China or Arabia or the Middle East or Africa. I think the only slavery we've been taught about is the U.S. slavery, which, by the way, they fought the Civil War over, the most costly war that country ever fought.
You're absolutely right. There is slavery still being practiced in some countries today. Their inability to see evil in any other group other than white people tells me that it's not slavery that they think is evil. It's white people. And if they can't admit that slavery is something that was also practiced amongst indigenous peoples in North America and South America. So before white people ever came to to these lands, it's an evil practice, but it has been practiced just about everywhere. It was more the norm than not until the last couple of hundred years. And yes, the whites practiced slavery, but whites were in the forefront of the fight to abolish it.
There was no other country that went to the same lengths that the United Kingdom did, not just to abolish slavery, but to then eradicate it for half a century. The West Africa Squadron of the Royal Navy, for purely altruistic reasons. I mean, I suppose there were geopolitical rivalries too, but they tracked down, captured, and freed hundreds of slave ships, countless thousands of slaves. Like for 50 years, the British Navy didn't just ban slavery, it eradicated. It was like the global anti-slavery cop. I don't know any other country in history that did that. The Americans suffered a greater loss than practically almost all their wars combined to liberate the country from the stain of slavery. I don't know. I just think that you're right. It's about it's like that necrotizing fasciitis, that unusual disease, that flesh-eating disease. Self-loathing, the woke mind virus of self-loathing is like necrotizing fasciitis. And I think young white kids are taught we are a unique evil. We did things unique in all history, when slavery goes back since the dawn of time. When slavery was banned in Canada, by the way, the greatest number of slaves was held by other indigenous bands, as you correctly point out. Indigenous on indigenous slave trading and slave raiding was far more numerous in Canada than the handful of black slaves who were in this country at the time. That's part of the ignorance behind the changing of the name Dufferin for Dundas, for the young Dundas Square in Ontario. Sorry, I'm going on too much. Back to you.
No. I mean, listen, this is it. It's very difficult to have a conversation about this with people who see the world so much in black and white, literally and figuratively. Where there can only be where evil and good are parceled out according to your identity. So it then becomes a kind of crime to indict, to even say, well, indigenous people weren't perfect either. No people has ever been perfect, and it doesn't matter what color you are. As a matter of fact, I mentioned before that it's very hard for progressives to consider that white people, as part of the Jewish people, can also be considered indigenous because of their heritage. They also don't understand that half of Israel is brown people, because half of the Jewish people come from Arab lands, where they were for hundreds, in some places thousands of years as well. They predate Islam in certain countries, in Egypt and Iraq and other places. They can't fathom that Arabs and Sephardic Jews or Mizrahi Jews are basically indistinguishable in terms of the way they present, their skin color. That's very hard for them to understand, because they understand that if you have that skin color, then you're a good person, you're an innocent person. So how can you be both Jewish and an Israeli and also innocent? Very hard for them to process that.